Okay, hello guys. I'm back after what seems like another eternity. I know in the last video I said I was going to be doing these once every month, but with COVID and working in education, kind of all of that just went out of the window, and the 9 to 5 just completely took control. I'm now aiming to start doing these a little bit more. It's the summer holidays now. I've booked 5 weeks off, which is absolutely amazing. That's pretty much all of my holidays for the year. But it gives me time to actually work on things for myself rather than just my 9 to 5 job. So the reason for this video is the Portrait of Britain 2021. For those of you that don't know about the Photography of Britain Awards, it's almost like a topographical look at the way that Britain is. It's about anyone and everybody being photographed, being able to photograph, and showing a true representation of how diverse the United Kingdom is. And it's a really good place to see some absolutely stunning examples of portrait photography. And I've wanted to enter the competition for a long time. I haven't simply, well, I say simply, I haven't because, you know, I'm extremely nervous about putting my work out there and having it rejected, which I think a lot of us can probably relate to, but also time constraints and just motivation, let's be honest, and just having that sort of drive to push myself towards a goal and a target. This year that's going to change. As I said, I've got time off of work, and now I'm going to be doing hopefully 5 different cities in 5 weeks to photograph people out on the street and create a body of work. And it kind of stems from a project. Again, I started in 2017 when I began my master's, when we were asked to look at Nottingham. As a portrait photographer, that gave me the ability to spend time in Nottingham and photograph the people, which is what Nottingham meant to me outside of the university. It was all about the diverse range of people that were in the city and made it what it was. I did a 7-day project where I photographed people, and I kind of set up a very makeshift studio. I don't intend to do that in the 5 different locations, although I do still intend to do that maybe later on and for a different project. So this is going to be the first of several videos where I kind of journal my progress, my thoughts, my feelings, my reactions to the day. So I've got all my camera gear sorted. I'm going to be taking my Sony A7 III, but I'm also taking my Bronica ETR-SI and a whole bundle of Kodak Portra 160 and Ecta 100, with the intention of crossing over from digital to analog as well. Okay, so I feel like I've kind of waffled on enough now. I've explained. Sorry, it's been a very, very long time, and I'm very, very out of practice in talking to the camera, it seems. I will be back to share my thoughts from the entire day with you shortly. Okay, guys, I am back. We're going to take a look at the images I shot. I'm going to explain why I'm not happy with them, where I went wrong, what I could have done to improve them, and then that will be it. So let's start with the first one. Okay, so this first shot, these two very kindly agreed to let me photograph them after I'd been rejected about 3 times. So I was starting to feel a little bit flat. I think by the end of it, they were a little bit fed up because, you know, I shot digital and then I switched over to my Bronica, and then it was the whole process of getting them to have a look at the model release. So it took way too long. It took far too long than what it did later on in the day. And what it should do. I really need to figure out a way of refining that whole process. So I shot this in 16:9. It was shot in 800 ISO at f2.8. I shot it wide on purpose. I wanted to have some space either side of my subject so that I could crop it down to a square later on. However, I shot it too wide. I don't think I should have shot it wide at all. I shouldn't have shot it in 16:9. Should have been a portrait. and I should have framed it so that it would convert into like a 4:5 10:8 aspect ratio. If I just switch over and show you my edit, I have gone with a square aspect ratio for this, not feeling that this will go into my submission for Portrait of Britain Awards. I do like the image. I think that they're quite an interesting pair of subjects. So in terms of edit, there is a slight color grade on there. There's, you know, a little bit of orange in highlights, a little bit of blue in the shadows. I've crushed my blacks, crushed my whites, and added a tiny bit of contrast in the middle. Yeah, so that's that. So if we go over to our next subject, this gentleman here, this was like the main part of Leeds City Centre, and I found these boards and I thought, right, that is going to be a really interesting background. You know, these parallel lines are going to pull in towards the subject, and you can see I've put him in an area where there's a bit of negative space behind him. So there's a couple of things. Shot slightly longer to give me room to crop in. I wasn't overly concerned about the grate behind his legs because I knew I would be cropping in. I have, at this point, taken the picture profile off, taken the ISO down to ISO 100, and it is shot at 75mm at 2.8. That's compressed the background a little bit, and it's given me a little bit of blur. What I would do if I was to take the shot again is increase that distance between the background and the subject even more. I like the shapes. I do like the shapes, but what I would have wanted is more blur in that background. So they still look rectangular, but they're less in focus. There's less detail in them. So let's have a look at the edit, and you can see there's again an orange and green color gradient on it. I've increased the contrast in his face a little bit, and also there's a vignette that's been added on as well. I've also popped the reds ever so slightly. So this is Scott. Scott and Jody very kindly said that they wouldn't mind. Really nice with me. They didn't mind the process of how long it took. I did explain what the images were going to be used for, the fact that because they were going to be used for a competition, I needed them to sign a document, and that it might take a couple of minutes to get through it all. And they were more than happy to do that. So that was absolutely brilliant. So in this shot, you can see really, really strong leading lines, all pulling in towards the subject, which is exactly what I wanted. There's really nice level of blur in the background. It's falling out of focus as it gets further away. I like the fact that the subject is looking away from camera. I think with his posing, if he'd been looking straight into camera, it might have been too confrontational. I quite like the fact that he's slightly bored and disengaged, and he's looking off at somewhere else. So let's take a look at the edit, and you can see again there's a vignette on here, slight color toning. The reds, like the colors look very muted. There's a little bit of color work where again we've gone with a split tone kind of color gradient, the vignette, and some increased contrast in the face and boosting the shadows slightly. Out of all of them, I think this is probably my favorite. So if we go to the shot of Jody, so I've compressed the background just that little bit more. I've repositioned, and this shot I think works quite well. The leading lines all direct the viewer to the face. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of this kind of alleyways and leading lines. Quite like the pose. It's quite a confident pose. You can tell that she was very confident in front of the camera. So again, a similar edit to what I put on Scott's image. You can see the same colors. I've increased the saturation in the hair's color. Slight vignette around the edge. So yeah, when I'm actually looking at it now, what I might do is put a little pop of light on the hands because of the vignette. It's just darkened the hands down slightly, so I might add in a little bit of extra light into that before I post these on Instagram. Okay, we have another subject here. So again, I've tried working with leading lines. I do get the feeling that I might have relied on them too much and got a little bit lazy with it and only been looking for that, and I may have missed out on other opportunities for interesting frames. Yeah, again, I feel like not telling my subjects how to pose and just saying, look, you know, don't worry about posing. I just want you to be relaxed. Just want you to stand in front of the camera is kind of, it may work for some people, you know, if they're slightly more confident and in front of a camera, they might own it that a little bit more. But I think for the average person, we automatically feel very uncomfortable when somebody's aiming a camera at us. And that kind of shows a little bit in these very static shots. That's not their fault at all. That's 100% my fault. I should have been directing, or at least conversing that a little bit more, trying to make people put them at ease, and that becomes more relevant with our next setup, but I'll get into that in a minute. So here is the second shot. This is the one that I think I'll be using. It's slightly closer in. The background's a lot more compressed. I'm not sure how I feel about the shadows stopping on our shoulder line. But there is a very strong triangular composition about this image, which I think I kind of like. I don't mind the fact that you've got this harsh line across the middle of the image, because the triangular aspect of the floor coming in kind of overpowers that, I think. Okay, so this is our next, and well, this is our last shot. There's actually a couple of this subject, but I've gone with this closer in image because I just like how it pulls attention to the subject. Now, again, I don't feel like this is strong enough to go into a submission for the portrait award. There's lots of ums in this as well. I will try and cut some of these out in post, but I can't cut too many out because it probably sound atrocious. So yeah, I mean, you can, when you look at this subject's face, you can see the unease. You know, it's very, very uncomfortable and very, very self-aware, because I haven't done my job as a photographer of making my subject relaxed and comfortable. Now, in a studio environment, you would have time to do that. You know, you have time to communicate and engage and have a little bit of a conversation beforehand or during, and just do your best to make them feel more comfortable. Obviously, that is amplified in a scenario like this, where you're trying to photograph somebody you've never met before, and you're trying to do it in such a time that you don't inconvenience them too much. But I should have made more of an effort to photograph this subject and make her comfortable with the process. Okay, so that's it for the portraits. I did manage to get a couple of nice architecture shots and street photography shots, and if you want to see those, you can follow me on Instagram. So let's talk about what I learned from my mistakes and what I'm gonna hopefully improve on the next time I go out and shoot. The first thing is that I'm trying to do too much at once. If I compare my shooting practice, the process I went through when taking pictures, between the shots I created in Sheffield, and if you want to see those again, check out Instagram, and you'll see the difference. There's a very, very big difference between the two. So, and the only thing that really changed, other than not getting model releases, which means I can't use them for the competition, is the fact that I was solely shooting digital, and I think the whole time I had a 50mm lens on, and that has obviously freed me up to be a little bit more creative and a bit more in the moment. Whereas because I'm shooting digital, putting the camera down, switching over to the Bronica, and then using the waist level viewfinder to focus and compose, it's just too much. And it rather than being completely focused on one thing, I am distracted and my concentration's broken. So I think I have to have a very serious think about what it is I'm going to do. In terms of compositions and stuff, I think I relied too heavily on using those leading lines and alleyways and stuff to further my composition. What I need to do is focus on the subject. Okay, yes, the background has to sort of add to the frame, but it shouldn't overpower, and I shouldn't be relying on that as a compositional tool to give my image impact. So as part of that, I also need to improve the way that I'm communicating with my subjects. I clearly haven't done it as well as I have previously, whether that's down to the time constraints of, shooting digital, shooting film, getting model release fund, and all of that pressure that I've given to myself. Maybe if I cut back on what I'm doing, I will feel a little bit more relaxed about it and be able to make the subject a little bit more relaxed. If you've stuck around for this whole video, thank you ever so much. If you are new to the channel and you've stumbled onto this video, why not check out some of my older videos by following the cue card there, or you can wait until the end screen where there will be a couple more. If you haven't already, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. If you absolutely hate this kind of video and you don't want me to do any more, then hit a thumbs down, and at least I know that you are not interested in this kind of content. If you want to follow me in my journey as I photograph 5 different cities and the local residents, and the whole process of submitting to the Portrait of Britain Awards. Then make sure that you subscribe. If you haven't already, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm not going to do the whole pointy thing again because I've done it. There will be a link to my Instagram in the video description. So I do thank you all for sticking around, and I will see you next time.